Welcome everyone to the SIG Architecture Community Meeting for Thursday, September 14th, 2017. I am your moderator and co-lead, Jay Singer-Dumars. Your other lead is Brian Grant, who is here but unable to speak due to some sort of creeping malaise. We will try and make the best of the meeting. The agenda is available to you at all times for your review at bit.ly/sig-architecture, and you will see the attendees and meeting minutes there. So what I want to go ahead and start doing is just take a quick visit on the action items that we had from last week to see if we have any updates. The first of those is Caleb Miles was split the proposal template out into separate PR, and I know there's some work here, but I'd love for Caleb to speak to that.
There's work going on there. Sorry, I may be a little bit robotic, conference or hotel Wi-Fi. So I just split out the proposal. I need to finish the PR with the template on it itself. And I tried to address the first round of comments that I got. So the process PR is up. I did rename the artifact, but that's not necessarily particularly interesting. So hopefully I'll be able to get the actual template up, PR up soon so we can iterate on that.
Okay, great. The next.
So I would love to see, like, if we can get sort of like a last call on that so I can make sure that I put it to my list and review and sort of like, you know, one of the things we got to get better at is driving these things to conclusion. And so, like, I would love to get a date on that for everybody to synchronize on. That would help me personally at least make sure that I don't miss stuff and I'm not, you know, negligently late on commenting.
Hey Joe, is the mailing list a good vehicle for those sorts of notices, or is there a way that you prefer to see that in Slack? Or
I mean, Slack is for me a little bit like the GitHub stuff where, you know, I try and keep up with like the company Slack and I can barely do that, and the Kubernetes Slack falls away unless folks mention me. I don't know. It's very difficult. But the email is, you know, email would be, I think, at least right now, this week work. It's tough.
Well, let's figure email's the best thing for the moment, and because I mean that's in theory going to hit the most people. So I think that would be good to get in the habit of saying, you know, announce, please review PR, blah, blah, blah. Close date for discussion is this. If there's no objections, then great, and so forth. So we need to get better at that for sure.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, for this one, like Caleb, you're in the driver's seat. So if you just want to pick some dates just to keep things moving forward, you know, as long as they're not like, you know, 3 hours from now, it's probably going to be reasonable.
Yeah, I would, I guess, pick we just do next Friday. Does that work for people? I mean, we can also do the Friday after next, the 29th.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good.
We'll not have people have to split their attention between the release on the 27th and looking at this.
Yeah, that would be great for me personally, just to be selfish.
Sure.
It looks like nobody's here from Europe, but Friday is usually bad for Europe.
That's fair.
Well, that would be the closing date, right? So that would simply be the last day to take comments.
Yeah. This is just like to have some sort of forcing function so that we don't let this sort of languish forever and we call it good enough at some point and move on with our lives, right?
Yep. Sounds good to me.
So what is that date? Just so I can put it in the notes.
The Friday after next is the 29th of September.
Okay.
So aim to close discussion and call this done by then.
Okay, great. I like it. So next bullet point is Caleb and I met to talk about the sort of grand design of the RFC proposal. So I understood it in better detail, and also how that might fit into a product management type process or backlog management for functionality that works. I feel like we're in good alignment. I just need to get some extra cycles and document that. So I'm hoping to have that done by middle of next week, ideally. Obviously, with the release happening, I'm pretty well taxed, but hopefully get that done soon. I'm really excited, actually. When we talked about it, it really felt like there's a really strong steel thread that'll run through the RFC and into product delivery process that we've talked about. And I can't wait for that to feel good, because right now one of the big takeaways in SIG release meetings and also the burn down meetings is that product and the pace of change from the SIGs feels very disconnected and out of alignment. So we need to fix that for 1.9 and moving forward. So hopefully we'll get some traction there. Matt Farina, are you on this call? I thought I saw you. Yes, you are.
I am. And I do not have the diagram done yet. This last week when I thought I would, it got away from me. I should have it done for the next meeting for review or before.
Okay, great. Okay. And is Ihor here? Let me see. I don't see him. We'll get an asynchronous update from Ihor on what he is doing for that. Let's see. So moving along, I am feeling a little concerned that the backlog in GitHub is not getting much action. Looking at it right now, it looks like the last change was 24 days ago, which is not to me seeming like a vibrant backlog. So I would love to call everyone's attention to that. I'm going to paste it again in the chat so everybody's got it handy. But essentially what we need to do is boil this thing down into some sort of priority. So I would love to either we can talk about it, or actually the right way to do it would be to do some pull requests with your take on priority with some commentary. But essentially we need to seriously get this in order and also add things that are missing, because Joe had some things that we probably should look at as well, such as what is the actual documentation / plan around breaking up the repos? What's the strategy for getting the staging stuff moved over? What is the structure for the incubation process moving forward? Is that actually a steering committee thing? So there's a lot of things that we need to get moved around and prioritize. So this sort of thing is notoriously hard to do in a collaborative meeting because there's no good way to vote or to prioritize this. But what I'd like to know, and I can just make notes in the agenda, is there anything, if you had to pick the one thing that we had to get done on this stat, what would be that one thing in your opinion? And I'd love to hear some opinions on that.
I'm happy to start talking if others aren't. For me, I think getting the processes down is probably the top of the stack. And then, looking at the backlog, it's kind of broken up that way. And then we can use some of those really critical things like Brian just posted about, like the events proposal, or maybe, work with Daniel to sort of get the repo breakup, stuff that is, been ongoing. Let's try and sort of push that stuff through the process as a beta test of the process to make sure the process is working well. So, I think if we try and take up any of the technical issues before we have that process, we'll be doing a lot of stuff ad hoc that we should have sort of, a recipe and a flow chart for.
Okay, so your vote is bootstrap all the processes, and I would add that I think we should do that in a minimal way, because perfect is the enemy of good right now, because these processes are not going to be fully formed. We just need to get something.
And I think, as we work through, those first things for those processes, there's probably going to be folks involved who are not super active members of this group. And so it's a good way for us to say, get honest feedback to make sure that we're not totally off pace with what we think a reasonable process is.
I would also say we probably want to see the processes as a pipeline and start at the beginning of the pipeline with the proposal one, so that proposals that are being opened now have the information and the structure that we're wanting to kind of make the later processes like review and things like that easier, instead of having to go back and fix proposals and say, oh, actually we need to think about these 10 things.
Right. So that goes back to the value of templating and all that. Okay.
And I think a big part of it is that we should expect that some, most, all, I'm not sure which of those proposals actually get some time in front of this group, and that should be a valuable thing sort of going both ways. So I don't know if we want to necessarily make this group be a gating thing for those, probably not for everything, but, you know, establish this culture of like more eyes, you know, earlier is good, and it's actually going to smooth things because you've had the discussions up front and you're not going to always be relitigating everything.
Cool.
So maybe getting a schedule of stuff. Yeah.
Maybe part of the templated process could be to outline scenarios when you should go to the architectural committee to decide if this should be approved by them. Cross-cutting features are a good example, but if it's isolated to a SIG, it doesn't make sense really, unless it percolates up.
So the one thing that I think is kind of half process and half technical is the mapping of code and other artifacts to SIGs. Getting that locked down, I think, will bring a lot more clarity in terms of who needs to be involved when what code is changing, that type of thing. Which some of that is just the busy work of going through and doing that, and some of that is a proposal around sort of how do we want to record that and how do we want to actually use it. That seems like quasi-process to some degree to me. All right, so I'm going to shut up and let other people weigh in.
So far, it feels pretty strongly like we need to look at the process things first, and also what are the artifacts that we can provide around those to make future burden less. That seems okay. So in the backlog, I'm going to pull it up here. So there is a process section. Well, there's a bit of process sprinkled in all this. I don't feel confident myself in sort of untangling these in a way that meets the things that everybody just said. Brian, I know you can't really talk, but nod vigorously if you feel like there's enough to go on in this discussion to maybe reprioritize the backlog based on your opinions. Okay, cool. Because it feels like there is, but you're the one who put that in the backlog, so I'd love for you to be able to interpret it, and then we can reinvigorate the discussion around the backlog again. So cool. So Brian, to take a cut at reorganizing the backlog.
And Brian, I'm happy to review that if you need somebody to take a quick look.
Okay, cool. Great. I'm calling that out as an action item, and we'll review that either next meeting or in the SIG channel. So I put a discussion item one from above as a placeholder for what we decided, because we're in a situation where it's a more broad decision than that, and we're actually going to reformat the backlog. I would say that maybe we could treat the remaining part of the meeting as either review the things we talked about last time or office type hours so we can discuss things. Brian, feelings on that? You can type it. Yep. And while Brian types, who's going to volunteer to entertain us in the meantime? I haven't had time to look at the latest on the proposal process. I'd like time to do that now. Okay, great. Let's visit the proposal process then. First of all, is Paul Mori on this call? Let me check and see. I don't see Paul. Okay, so no update there. So is this, are there PRs specifically that you want to discuss, Brian, or is this just a general discussion? If so, whatever you type. Okay. So if everybody could pull up this pull request, I'll also open it on my browser, and we can, I'll share a screen on that so we can look at it. Sorry, we're a little bit chaotic today. It's always hard when you have to shuffle things in real time. Okay, so share screen.
I guess one question that I have for Joe, because I was unable to resolve his comments. I guess personally know of a better, I guess high-level metric for success other than the ability to build, to put together this user-facing documentation, like the release notes or the release announcements, for the usefulness of an enhanced proposal process. I would love to hear any suggestions there. At least I added in the proposal that, at least it seems to me, having been in SIG release and SIG PM, that creating a high quality proposal is another cross SIG function. It's a special case, at least in my mind. Because at least trying to watch our tech writers try to build this documentation and having to see the back and forth they have to do, something seems to need to change there.
So yeah, I totally agree that we need a better way to actually understand what are the major changes going into a release so that we can pull together, the checklist around documentation, the checklist around release notes. So you'll get no argument from me there. I think the question in my mind, and I'd love to hear others sort of weigh in on this, is that the same process as the proposal process, or is it a different process? Because for me, these proposal things, like if we take a look at something like the repo reorganization, I mean, this is something that's going to stretch across many different releases. It's something where we want to have a stake in the ground of where we want to take it over time, and it's going to take a long time to actually sort of realize that. And so that type of proposal is not, it's not scoped to any specific release. So it seems like, any sort of, summary of what's going into a release is going to be a subset and maybe references these proposals, but I don't know if they're necessarily the same set. And so that's really my main concern here. And I think I saw Clayton put a comment in there that features, or whatever we call these proposals, are definitely going to stretch across releases. So yeah,
Yep.
does that make sense to folks?
Well, I don't want to stifle discussion, but yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. And like I said, I was hoping that these, so I'm going to call them KEPs now, because I like one syllables. Would be the kind of the centralized place to find all that information, such that you could, during the release cycle, when you're looking at the issues for things that are actually scheduled, or that actually should have landed in the release, you can then follow back rather than having to splunk through code to figure out why a change is important and the history there. It's in one place, and so it's a repository of information, and not tied necessarily to a single release. I do imagine that these things would often span multiple releases. I mean, they may not, but they may. I think for definitely the large efforts, they definitely would.
See, I would totally be on board with something like, instead of the release note type of thing that we put in changes, we have a reference from the change to a KEP. And then as we cut releases, we have all the active sort of in the process of being implemented KEPs have a section sort of like, well, this part of the KEP got implemented in 1.8, this part of the KEP got implemented in 1.9. So at least sort of using these as meet-me points for sort of bucketing sort of changes in releases, that seems reasonable to me, and that could be automatable. So maybe that's a little bit of a a little bit of a mid-ground. But okay, so Brian's saying that, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that shows up in the release notes that sort of fall below the level of the cap. I think that's what his chat said. Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's going to be stuff that is all internal that is not release note related that we're going to want to have caps around. So it just seems like it's a different thing, but I totally hear the desire to have some more formal process and automation around sort of release changes and release notes, because it's a total disaster right now.
Yeah, and I mean,
in terms of the amount of manual work.
Yeah, I guess I don't. I guess we would have to see how it goes. But in terms of having many changes that wouldn't need a cap, I mean, I think the cap is, at least in my mind, still a vehicle for communicating about a change, so that it contains documentation at a high enough level for a tech writer to produce the entry in the release notes. And so, yeah, for things that are like bug fixes or critical bug fixes or known issues, those wouldn't have a cap necessarily. But I think that the vast majority of things that should be in a release note should have a cap. And yes, there are thousands. Oh, yep. Sorry, Rob.
I mean, like one rule we could do, and I don't know if this is a good idea, it's probably not, but just as a sort of straw man, is we could say that every user-facing change requires to be rolled up to a cap. And so that would force folks to sort of bucket these things together. But this means that, oh, I want to change the column layout of cube control, I have to write a cap. That's probably not what we want to do either.
Well,
but maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe we want to say every user-facing change requires a cap.
That's too much process. I think you'll get detractors unless it's completely visible to like newcomers. Because some people might have great experience. I mean, the goal of process is to make it transparent and clean and less Byzantine. And I think right now it's very Byzantine, right? Like, if you can truly describe it to me without having to reference the other documents in a single workflow, that would be ideal.
Well, I think the first thing we can do to make things less Byzantine is have clear ownership, right? And so having this group be the ones who sort of the buck stops for the whole proposal process, that's at least something, which is something that we really didn't have with the feature process before, at least clear sort of ownership and around that.
Automated tooling for this is super important too. I haven't not read through the proposal, so this is my first time looking at it, but I will read through it and comment.
Yeah, it's still a little bit early, and there's some holes in it, but that's by design, just so that we can start getting the framework up and then lock it down as it makes sense.
And Brian said ownership is one of the things I want to add to the metadata proposal. So. I talked to Caleb a lot about this because I was curious about how all this would work in detail. And he was very kind and patient and explained this to me over and over as I asked the question about 5,000 different ways about what does this actually look like in progress. And essentially the purpose is to put some sort of guidelines and wrapper around deliverable value such that it can be worked by anybody. I mean, the idea is that we want to have enough detail in these things that somebody can actually work on it and not have it be some ivory tower type document. So by forcing function, that tells you a lot about what those need to look like and what they're trying to do. And so in essence, the process has to be a way of describing deliverable value. In the case of architectural initiatives, the value we're delivering may affect contributors, or it may affect future iterations of the product or the ways in which it gets implemented. Sometimes the delivery value is for user-facing content or for cluster operators or whatever that is. So as long as we have those defined, and then the process is smart enough to provide a chain of custody for a feature or whatever it is we're delivering from ideation to delivery, that's all we have to account for. And I think that Caleb's proposal is very strongly rooted in that. I don't think that's too onerous or too much Byzantine process. It's pretty straightforward.
And I guess talking with, we're starting to talk about mentorship, at least in Signo, we had a brief discussion about it. And yeah, it seems that we need to very quickly start moving away from the world where we have people very high in the owner's trees, both doing all the proposals and all the implementation, in order to start to help mitigate the risk of burnout. So that if we have a well-described value proposition, and so we can have newer contributors start actually implementing this stuff and working up the contributor ladder themselves. And I feel like that's a lot of the work of more long-standing contributors, is to do that, to help with that process, help with that scoping, so we can grow our pool of contributors.
Yes, and eventually reviewers. Okay, so we sort of got a little bit of field of the actual PR. I mean, some of the stuff is in there, but so Brian, you added a comment on there. Measures success. How many features use the process? How many proposals merge before the code does? And latency to approval. Those are fantastic. I'm a huge fan of don't measure anything you can't influence, and those all seem really like we can influence those things.
So, I mean, one thing we can do is that we can have some of the KEPs that are cross-cutting require some sort of higher level approval. And then in other cases, when a KEP is relatively limited in terms of the SIGs that it hits, it's more of an informational communication device versus something that's a sort of review decision-making device.
Yeah, I like the idea of having questions as part of the template. Like right now, a lot of proposals get opened and we're kind of counting on people in the right areas noticing that those exist and asking those questions themselves, or going and hunting down the people and asking questions about the proposals. And if we can kind of ask some of the cross-cutting SIGs, like what questions need to be answered for new proposals, like to determine, is this something that has impact on this area, and kind of either make that part of the template or just have that as a list that the various SIGs can maintain, not to be burdensome, like each one should maybe have one or two questions, just to kind of get people to think, is this something that I need to reach out to this SIG for? Yes, no. Kind of distributing that work, helping people think through that as they're going to open a proposal.
And actually, I think that's brilliant, because it'll force us to determine what constitutes a major architectural change versus a trivial one, right? We need to understand those guidelines almost more than SIGs.
Yeah, and that gives us a concrete way to engage the SIGs, say, what do you want to know about a proposal to know whether you are interested or need to pay attention or don't care. And that's something we can maintain and adjust. You know, if something comes up and say, oh, well, this fell through the cracks and we should have been involved. Oh, well, what question would have triggered that? Let's update this and iterate on it.
Looks like we've had a few people join after the fact, just to fill people in where we're at. We're talking over this pull request about the proposal process. I'm going to copy the link URL and I'm going to place it in chat for people who have just arrived. This is what we're talking. Oh, somehow I pasted Brian's comment. Copy link. Try this again. What is going on? Somebody else want to paste that in there, because my paste is totally borked. Try one more time. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. So this is the proposal we're talking about right now. Okay. So where do we see? Is there been much just outright disagreement in this proposal thus far? I mean, does anybody feel like we're way off track? There's activity going on in chat. Brian's asking, where is the proposal template? And there's another, it's been extracted but not in a PR yet. So in case you're looking for that. And for new arrivees, Brian is sick and is not able to speak. So keep your eye on chat for Brian's commentary. So Caleb, have you in your travels, have you had anybody actually just outright dissent with this process, or what kind of pushback have you gotten thus far? I mean, other than what's in the PR.
No outright dissent. I think until it's concrete, it's hard to talk about. It's more the fear of things that can go wrong, which I totally agree with. They're all dangers. I do one thing I need to do, and I don't know whether it makes sense to add it to that proposal or not, was to work through Derek's suggestion of how this would work for an existing feature that we've graduated. So I'll definitely be following up with him to try and put that together. And also to try to get his thoughts about how mentorship should work for a SIG like SIG node.
Cool. And then as far as the overlap and dovetailing with the contributor experience SIG, are you aware of any places where the mentoring model associated with StarFC process wildly is divergent from what SIG Contribex is trying to do, or does it feel like it's aligned there as well?
I am not aware whether it's wildly divergent. I guess I'll follow up with Paris's thoughts there.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I know this meeting's a little bit slow on the pacing with some dead air. So Brian's adding some stuff here. Cool. Thank you, Brian, for adding that to the PR. Is there anybody else who has comments on this, or should we open up the floor to any remaining topics?
I think Brian wanted to move on to the metadata proposal itself,
okay.
Which is linked there. And I guess we'll wait for Joe to get back inside.
Okay.
For him to speak up about it.
Yeah. Wait, where's the link to that? I missed it.
Was
it a doc?
Yeah. It's also, I think.
Oh, I see it
here. Okay, cool.
Got it. Sorry. When you're sharing your screen, the controls are not necessarily super obvious. Okay. I have to admit, I haven't actually looked at this particular document myself yet, so. So everybody, in case you arrived after the chat, here's the document that is being shared currently. Oh, Brian, thank you, beat me to it. So are we thinking just to have like a YAML file attached to every KEP, basically, that has this in it, or what are we going to do with that? Or are you just going to have it as text fields?
No, that's at least how I thought it would be, just YAML slapped in the KEP.
Okay.
Which you can extract with your garden variety, command line tools.
Yes.
One thing this is like down in the weeds, but as we start like putting structure and data into these proposals, we should think about, like, in the future when we improve these and like add new things and revise these, what are we going to do with old proposals? I know we kind of hit this issue with the features repo where we had a template that had a ton of stuff in it, and then a bunch of features got opened, and then we changed the template, and there were all these like 10% completed issues open that just kind of lingered on. I don't really know what we want to do, but we should at least consider, like, this will happen. We will want to adjust the template and adjust the metadata, and we should figure out kind of what we want to happen with older links.
Yeah, I want to echo that. That's super important.
Do we have a Joe yet? Is Joe still doing something?
Yeah, sorry, Joe and I are at a conference today, so that's why.
Well, I'm just glad you could make it at all. Thank you. Okay, I'm trying to update all docs. I have no metadata. I think that's, Brian, I think that's a great suggestion to update old docs, because that'll also suss out places where, like, hey, this thing has metadata that we actually might need in other places. So I think that's the same goal as Derek's proposal about retroactively working a feature through the process. All right. I'm being a lousy host. Is there anybody else who has anything to add while we're waiting here? Brian says, I think all the fields in the proposal are necessary, but I put some more in the comment if you want to expand it. Okay. That first comment. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right.
So click that show more. Yeah, and the reviewers and approvers, I got to put up a second, another proposal, and maybe something about how we should be interacting with GitHub moving forward, as long as we use it to host our VCS. It would be nice to maybe use teams here. So you, again, reinforce the SIG structure, SIG zoning everything, rather than having requesting review from individual contributors. But that probably needs more thought, because if you do that, then anyone who is on said team is able to approve changes. So I think I need to on that a little bit more. But it does in the UI present that the team owns this pull request rather than an individual, which is kind of nice. A lot of the load shedding stuff then we then get for free that we have to build into the Blunderbuss today.
You know that, let's see, if you look at Garrett's PR that reorganizes by SIG, it will enable owners' files. Huh. Let me pull that up.
Yeah, that is a good point. But I guess, yeah, it would be, my suggestion would be to either, for Blunderbuss, just rely on the aliases. And it's, I guess, kind of dovetails with something that Joe, and now I guess I should be working on as well, is creating a list of the list of contributors and creating the teams programmatically in GitHub. So then you can replace all of the individual people in the owner's files with just the owner's aliases. Yes, I agree. That auto assignment is never going to be good enough.
Yeah, that's true.
which I think is kind of my suggestion, to punt that to the team level rather than trying to auto assign a single individual. Now you do have problems with people claiming, but yeah. And you do also have to have trust between the members of the SIG, since anyone could then approve on behalf of the SIG. But the UI is kind of nice for that. It says that who did it on behalf of which team when you actually merge a PR.
Yeah, that I think the team aspect of that seems smart. So in terms of, something you said, Caleb, which I love, is that changes are cheap in CVS. So it's, if we're version control, so like why are we so concerned or whatnot about somebody making an out of bounds change? Like why is that considered such a high risk? Is it because there are not backstopping processes that we catch such a thing, or yeah?
Because the volume of changes is way too high to keep track.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we need to work on that distributed ownership so we can.
There have been cases where we've noticed, even with the current process, we've noticed changes like 5 months later.
Yeah.
That had to be reverted.
That's what I figured. Something that eventually we might want to look into is just like what are our protection mechanisms around out of bound changes? Because right now it feels like there's a lot of holes. So, okay, so I'm just going through this proposal here from Garrett. Whoa, yikes! Go on the bottom.
Click on the files. The files link at the top.
Yeah, one sec. Sorry. Oh. That was weird. We broke GitHub.
We didn't even get the super cool unicorn.
I know.
Let me see.
Wow, it's really borked. I'm clicking and it's just spinning. I think we're going to get a unicorn out of this one. Nope. Okay. This is really hard to read.
Try the link I just posted.
Okay. All right. This is really cool.
One of those uncategorized ones is just a bug.
Okay. Resource management?
That's the work group.
Oh, okay.
Clayton and I reviewed it.
So, I mean, we all know this, but this kind of scares me a little bit. If you look at the division of responsibilities, they're pretty even except for API machinery and Node. It makes me wonder, like, how do
that's the nucleus. Almost everything in the system that's interesting touches those.
Yeah. Maybe something we want to look at is how we assist in all the things that need to happen in those 2.6.
The other big one is networking.
Yeah.
But I don't know why there aren't as many proposals there.
Yeah, that's odd.
But some of those are buggy. Anyway, I'll fix that.
Okay. How was this generated? Did you actually
manually?
Manually? Yuck. Okay.
like Garrett took a first stab, and then I made a pass with dozens of comments, and then Clayton did the same.
Okay. So what do you, so Brian, you're talking, and I'm really sorry you're having to talk. What is the next step for this? What do we need to do with this?
This is almost done.
Okay.
I'll just find Garrett, and I think we can get it done. It just needs to be rebased and like 2 or 3 bugs fixed.
Okay.
So branch and extract.
Then do you want to set a date for that? So just like we were doing for the other thing, like what's the
Tomorrow.
deal date? Okay, cool. Okay, finalizing. Let's see. SIG proposal structure by Friday the 15th. Let's see. Let me get a link from that. Oops. Okay. Cool. That'll be great to get that. And put that in the notes. Okay. Is there anything, we've got 9 minutes left. Is there anything that, that we need to discuss further about this, or do we feel pretty satisfied? All right. Well, I'll take that as we're pretty well ready to move on. Are there any announcements or anything that anybody needs to share with the group before we adjourn? Just for the 1.8 release perspective, we're going to try and do the code thaw tonight. We've been having a lot of problems with getting good test signal, but we're trying to rectify that as best as possible. Updates for that process will be in the SIG release Slack channel. I'll also be sending out an email update to the thread that I started yesterday, and that goes to Kubernetes Dev and SIG leads and SIG release. So anything else before we call it? All right. Thank you, everybody, for your very valuable time, and I hope you have a great day, and I will maybe see some of you soon at the community meeting. Right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jace.
Yep.
Bye,
Bye.
Jace.
Thanks, Jace.
Bye.
Bye.